Clyde has an excellent topic for us today. Clyde is to be thanked for sponsoring. Clyde is the author of this book here that you all need to have in your possession. This is the Integrity Notary Journal, and that's the best one that's out there. I tell you, there's no debate here today. It's really good way to keep track of your signings and all your notarizations now. Clyde, I just want to segue into your. I'll mute here in just a second, but we already had a question, and I believe it was a Sinex demo where they were asking. They said, "Okay, we're mobile notary, we've got remote online notary. How, and we're supposed to keep one journal. What's up with that? How do we do that? And is that a paper journal or what?" So take it away, Clyde. This is that's right up your alley, and that's what
Yes,
we're here.
yes. So I'll say that question, and then what Trace was talking about, the due diligence of you as a notary and the work that we do is an insurance policy in and of itself.
Yes, sir.
And that is very much what I'm going to be talking about. So let me see if I can share my good old screen here. And so now,
this book, Applied Notary Laws and Practice. I bet you have that one.
I'm sorry, what?
Professor Clausen's book.
Oh, yes.
There you go.
Totally. It is
homework for y'all.
Yes, it is the book. If you do not own it, definitely
on your bookshelf. Yes, sir. I'll shut up now, Clyde. I apologize for my reading.
Hey, just want to verify, you can see the screen that I'm sharing, the presentation? Okay, awesome. So I'm going to get into this, and really my goal, different than the one stated, but the beginning goal is really just to stimulate this discussion and to stimulate your thoughts. In the presentation that you get from John, you are going to get this in there. So if you have any questions about who I am, there's my little bio at the beginning that you can look at and read or burn, however you so desire. And then let us start off with all of our lovely disclaimers today. I'm not an attorney and I'm not providing any legal advice. What I'm sharing to you is based on my own personal research as to what the standard of care is for notary publics. And as always, please follow your state statutes and if you have executive orders in place. But I also want to make sure that you understand that I am a true lover of technology. My former career was in technology. So while I'm going to be talking about situations that arise during a RON session, please note that I love this stuff. And so I'm not here to bash it, but I'm here just really to bring forward situations, okay? And that I'm not affiliated with any RON platform. I'm not suggesting that you use a particular one or not use one. So I'm totally agnostic to this, what platform you want to use. And then for complete disclosure, as John said, I am the creator of the Integrity Journal. So I do believe in journaling, and I do believe that it's an important component. And so my goal today is really to gain your buy-in. It is an essential part of our profession, and I do believe it deserves our due diligence. There is published studies about the proportion of notaries who actually use journals. Let me just say that the numbers are very, very frightening and scary, because even those for us who are required to do journaling, many of us only do partial journaling. I refer to it as the smidges and dabs of notary journaling. So I'll put down some of the information. It's a quick thing I'm trying to get done. So I get the date in there, I get the signer's name, I checked an ID, so it's a driver's license, and then they had 3 documents and we're done. Okay, thank you very much. That's the journal. Other times it may be missed entirely, they don't collect signatures, a variety of things. So my point here is that we now have an electronic journal as part of the RON platform. And my goal, my ultimate goal here is to convince you that our paper journal is really a powerful ally to that electronic journal. But really at the heart of it, I believe that the e-journal, that RON journal, is a complement to the paper journal. The paper journal is your real journal, and that any other piece of information helps to support what you have in the paper journal. Personal belief, okay? So purpose of that journal is really to record all of our acts as we perform as a notary. It is a public record in that people can request the information that's there based on certain ways of requesting that by our state and conditions by which they're doing it. But nonetheless, it becomes a public record as we are public servants. So why should we care about all this? Well, because when a notarization is actually documented securely in a journal that can be protected, and it becomes a protection then for both that notary and that notary public and the public itself, because it begins to substantiate the integrity of the notarizations that took place. All right, so this is all the documentation. This is everything that went on at that signing ceremony of the documents. And this is the official public record. And so the other thing I want to point out is that in some states who have RON, they actually require both the paper journal and the electronic journal, and they require that the RON notarizations be included in the paper journal. So basically what you're doing is you're using your paper journal, and when you have a RON journal, a RON event, you're just adding it as the next activity in your journal. So some states are requiring that so that there can be a complete list of all notarial acts that a particular notary does. And it's all in one place, and you can see the sequential order of all of those acts. So we're not perfect, we're human. The RON platforms that we use do their due diligence in making sure that there's not issues, but hey, we're out on the internet. We're on electricity. There are fluctuations, stuff happens. It's called life, right? So the law doesn't say that we have to be perfect. The law says that we need to act with reasonable care, right? And how do we do that? We do that by our habit of due diligence, right? So it's through that process that we begin to show our reasonable care. We consistently document information from notarization to notarization, from appointment to appointment, and we have that consistency. Exactly what Tracy was talking about. Do the same thing over and over and over. It's called rinse and repeat. And by doing that, we establish an entire set of behaviors that show how we protect the public and how we go about doing our business, right? So when we start to, in my opinion, and I get really junked about this, when we abdicate part of that responsibility and we say, oh, I'm going to rely solely on what's given on that RON platform for my journal, I believe that we are no longer following because we're not able to capture the depth of information that you would normally see in a paper journal for that RON notarization. Okay, and let me give you some examples here. So here is the basic list of what are considered best practices that you would be including in your journal for a notarization. There are, depending upon who you follow, there are roughly 13, 14, 15 different pieces of data, you know? So we have, of course, some basic stuff, the date, the time, and maybe even the end time of when that session happened. What was the location? So where was it at? What was the name of the document or the name of the documents? Sometimes people want to make sure that they include their number of pages. Some states require that. What was the type of notarization applied? Was it an acknowledgement? Was it jurat? Who was the signer? What is their contact information? And how were they identified? And then other pieces of information would be was an oath administered? And is there a way of recording that in your journal and notating that you did administer an oath? And then we also want to always assess what we call the willingness and capacity of our signers, right? So are they willing? Are they mentally competent? Do they understand? Are they acknowledging what the document is about? And then, of course, we have our signer signature, their thumbprint, if it's required by law or not, as if it's allowed, but also then the notarial fee and other information like who else was in the room at the time of the signing. Again, now you get a clear picture of all the different things that were taking place for that signing session. When we go to RON and we look what's included in the RON journal, it is a much smaller subset of information. So of course it has our date and time, ending of the session. It has an IP address of where this took place. It has the file name of the document, typically, not the actual name of the document. The type of notarization, depending upon the platform that you're using, sometimes that's a global operant, meaning that if I say that I'm doing an acknowledgement, it applies acknowledgement to all documents that are put onto the platform, or it'll be acknowledged as all jurats if I've chosen jurat. Some platforms allow you to specify individually for those documents. Of course, it tells you who the signer was. It also tells you how they were identified. And then notice it doesn't include a lot of the other information. It includes typically the notarial fee. Again, some platforms will allow the notary to populate. Some platforms won't allow the notary to populate the platform fee. One particular one that I know of automatically puts in $25 and doesn't allow the notary to edit. So that's the data that's then included. So what I want to impress upon you is that there is a discrepancy between what we have as far as best practices and what we have as what we actually get collected as part of that RON session. So there's a difference there. So now there are other situations that begin to arise, and the RON journal, that electronic journal, just isn't adequate for those purposes. So these are real life situations and scenarios that have taken place. So you might be in a session, and I refer to them as the widgets. The widgets aren't working. So these are text entry fields, dates, whatever. So in this particular scenario that I'm going to describe for you, the signer has a text field in which they need to enter their name. For whatever reason, the system isn't allowing them to enter anything into a text field. On the notary side, though, it will allow them to enter into that text field and to populate information. So the notary now has basically three choices. They can decide to terminate the session because they're unable to have the document signer actually populate the information requested. And at that point, then, of course, we would want to document why a notarization didn't take place. Another option would be the notary may say, do I have your permission to populate this information on your behalf? Again, this would be something that you would want to document as part of an act that you performed in that journal. Or you may choose to decide, we're going to go ahead and move forward. We'll close out this session and we'll open up a second session, and I'll invite the signer back in to populate in the information onto the document. So those are three different ways in which that scenario can be handled. I believe that all three of those require a level of documentation that isn't provided for in that electronic journal. Another thing that happens once in a while is that you have issues of freezing where the video goes out. And sometimes the solution really is just to refresh a browser. So when that happens, there are times when the video that had been recording may actually start with a new video, meaning that it will replace the old video, and that's not known to the notary. Sometimes when you refresh the browser, then it will clear the signatures and stamps from the documents, and they'll need to be re-signed. My point being is that you go through the process, the notary may believe that all of that original video is there because the documents are still intact. And so they continue on, they close out, and it is only afterwards, after the download of that video, since it needs to render, that the notary can actually see what was included in the video. And again, that would be something that I believe is important to document, that you needed to go through that refresh process and what was the outcome. There are other times when the connections are just too poor. I do a lot of work with adoptions, surrogacies, which means that many times the clients are actually inside of a hospital. And if you have been on Wi-Fi in a hospital, you know this is not a good mix. It's kind of like an oil and water situation. And again, there will be times then when that's happening and it's virtually impossible because we can't maintain the connection. And again, now that is a notarization session that I am not able to fulfill. So I need to document that inside of my journal. But an electronic journal typically does not allow for documentation of sessions that didn't complete. They don't exist. So the next thing is, there are other times when the session that you've had just doesn't close properly. It just hangs, right? And again, you're left with the situation where you need to typically refresh. And again, we're back into that scenario then of what has or hasn't been saved. And again, if it is a restart, then again, that's something that you want to be able to document inside of your journal. I touched on this briefly as well when we start talking about scenarios, and one of those being around identifying the type of notarization that's applied. Some platforms have that as a global option, and so you cannot specify on a per document basis what type of notarization took place. And then the same thing with the fees, that some platforms don't allow the notary to actually edit that space, whereas others just pre-populate information in. Which brings us to KBA. And one of the things here that, again, I think make it really important for the paper journal is that there's different ways in which the platforms provide information back to the notary so that the notary can make a decision as to whether or not they're going to accept those credentials. So some platforms are pretty, I call them the black and whites. They come back and they say either a pass or a fail, and that's it. You get no additional information. Some platforms actually provide a level of confidence. So they'll say pass, and the confidence level is 50%, or the confidence level I have seen as being 0%. And they may or may not give you additional information. Some platforms do provide additional information like, oh, the address that's on the ID doesn't match the address that was entered. So, you know, we typically have a situation there where somebody has moved, or the image that was captured for the ID is blurred, or that the barcode on the ID couldn't be read. So all of that data comes back to the notary to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to accept those credentials. The thing that I've seen, though, is that let's say that I accept somebody's credentials and it was less than 100% confidence. When I look at the journal, the electronic journal side of that, all it says is that they went through KBA and identity verification and that they passed. It doesn't give me any of that additional information in my journal. So again, those would be things that I'd want to be documenting, especially if I decide to decline those credentials and then decline that notarization. Because again, we should be documenting when we do not go forward with a notarization. And so we have this situation where the electronic journal isn't going to be capturing sessions that have been terminated. Which brings us to sort of the largest issue, and that is if at any point the original data, you know, that video, the journal itself, that e-journal, the history information is compromised, then the integrity of those notarizations can be called into question. And so we need to be due diligent to ensure that that information is protected. And there's a couple of things, right? So one, we can back up all of those digital assets. But most importantly, we can maintain one comprehensive paper journal that lists all of our notarizations and they are logged sequentially. So when I designed the integrity journal, I based it on a variety of those best practices, those standards of care that were outlined at the very beginning. And put that together. There were several iterations and there was a trial in the development of this, but I want to show you what it looks like then inside of the journal and when you have a RON entry in it. So the way the journal is laid out, it has an upper and a lower page. And that's really all I want you to get from this, is just to know that for each session that you have or each appointment that you have, there's an upper page where information is put and a lower page. So here's an upper page. This information is actually taken from a real live RON session. Of course, some of the information has been disguised to not, relay any personal information. So we have as you can see in the upper left, I'm right left challenged, by the way. So if I say the wrong, it's just the realities of life, okay? In the upper left-hand corner, you're going to see the date and the time that the session took place, right? And you're going to see the names of the individuals, and they're both identified as being signers. And then we're going to see how they were identified. So for both of these people, they were using a driver's license and they both went through KBA and ID verification. There was nothing problematic with that. They came through in flying colors. And so I then recorded the state from which the ID came from, as well as the expiration date. Next to that is my willingness and competency checks. And so you'll see that everybody was checked off on that. And the type of notarization that was performed was a RON. Down below then, you can see the different documents that were included in this session. You'll see that some of them are jurats, some of them are acknowledgements. You'll see that some were signed by both people, some were only signed by one person. So, very typical kind of signing session. What I also want to point out here is that there's this little A by one of those documents, and you'll see that it's the very first write-in document, the authorization of release of medical records. So just keep that in the back of your mind for one moment. We're going to go on to the next page. So on this page now, we collect a little bit more information. So the signing address. So if this were go out and physically meet somebody, this is what the address would go in there. If it's a RON signing, then it's what platform did you use? And then was anybody else in the session? That information is collected and who the client was, and then the breakdown of the fee. So then we get into the note section. And what I want to do is point out a couple of pieces of data here. So for my way of journaling, I always put on this top line, you'll see their call ended at, in this case, it was at 10:40 a.m. And you'll notice if you call back, the session initially started at 10 o'clock. So it was about a 40-minute session. Now, you'll notice the first line of notes, and there's our little A with a circle, and it's in documenting that Frank originally signed the document before the session. And you may or may not recall, but this was actually a jurat that was attached to that document. So of course, he needed to re-sign that document and sign it under oath. So I did ask him to go ahead and strike that and re-sign and redate the document. And that's then documented in my journal here. And then you'll notice that the next lines down that Sarah was in a hotel with poor Wi-Fi connection, and she just kept dropping and rejoining. She later on moved to the lobby for a better connection. And then the next thing we see down here is that the session restarted at 10:20. So basically the whole session restarted at 10:20. I ended up calling Frank and he rejoined with Sarah because all of the documents had lost all of their information. So all the signatures and all the stamps, and the video restarted. So we restarted the session and then they re-signed documents. So all of that gets notated in the journal. And so now I have a complete record to go with what I'll refer to as the supplemental information coming from the e-journal. And then at the very bottom of the page here, you'll see this is information for each of those signers. This would have been their addresses and then their contact information. Why are we not moving? Oh, so anyway, shameless plug. It is available on Amazon. And with that, I will leave it to questions. I just need to figure out how to stop sharing.
You're fine, Clyde. That's awesome. Thank you so much for your presentation. There's so much information in there, guys, and you do a really neat job of getting it across, Clyde. Thank you. I took the liberty of creating a pretty link. Of course, you can go on Amazon and search for the Integrity Notary Journal. If you want to help Daddy build a roof this fall before this winter comes, I'm just teasing. Hit that affiliate link, notary.events/integrity. That will help Clyde. It'll help me.
Thank you.
A little bit. Help Clyde a whole lot more than it does me. Maybe, I don't know, but it's all good. The point being is the link's there to get you help with your journal, and there's no more important aspect of notary work than your journal. It backs you up, and as an attorney, when you're called on the stand, you better be able to produce your evidence. That's the way it goes, folks. So Clyde's provided us some great info. We've got some time for his questions. Amy, what questions do we have for Clyde? I'm sorry. Do you include the?
So there was, John, I'm going to jump in. There was a question regarding Pennsylvania's journaling, because Pennsylvania requires the expiration date of the document of the ID verification. Are you planning to add that?
Oh, to the Integrity Journal?
Correct.
So right now I don't, but it does have a space in the journal itself. By each document, there's a small blank that can be purposed for additional information. And so that would be a place to then put the date for the document.
And I'm looking at all the chat here because I've been playing around with them in the chat, just so you know.
Okay.
We published your Clubhouse link so they can reach with you. And there was a question regarding, okay, so Christina asked, can you put raw notarizations in the same journal as paper notarizations, or do you have to have a separate book for raw?
So my recommendation would be use one journal, one paper journal, and just do them sequentially. So for example, today I was out at the hospital, hence, I want you to see this, John. John, do you see this? Okay.
Nice.
All right. So I was out and about, as they say, and I did my session. And so I have a session coming up here that's going to be a RON session, and it will go right on the next page of my journal. That way, there is this consistent flow of everything that I've done in one place, and it's all bound together.
Well, and I'm going to tell you what. So today, my journal saved my butt. Okay. I had to go back and be able to validate whether a client used KBA or not. And that saved me because I was able to go back to my journal and be able to tell that title agency that they did, in fact, pass KBA. So it is definitely something you want to have. So Mary Baker says she is ordering it now.
Oh,
All
thank
right.
you.
Debbie says she uses a different journal and it doesn't have an area for the signer's willingness or mental competence
No.
understanding. Is that negligent or is that really required is the question.
So there's this difference between what is the minimum standards that are required for a state, right? So each state outlines what are the minimum pieces of data that are required. Then there are the best practices. And in that set of data, it would be that, yes, you should be indicating whether it's a specific checkbox like that. And I'll tell you how I use it. So in particular, if I have a power of attorney signing and it is in a healthcare setting, I make sure that one, I'm documenting then in my notes part, the ombudsman was present for the signing, as well as, the conversation that I had with the individual that ties to my check of, yes, indeed, that they are mentally competent. They understood what was being signed. Otherwise, it is just a normal check just to make sure that, yeah, we talked. I can back this up, or do I need more information to back up my decision that this person was mentally competent? So it is not negligence on the part of any other journal. It's just something that is not typically included. The other thing that's not typically included is, you will notice in the integrity journal, next to where they put their signature and their thumbprint, if it's something that you do in your state, is a box to actually have the signer initial if they've been given an oath. So it's one thing for me to say, yes, indeed, I did administer an oath to these individuals, but it's really powerful if I have their initials there saying, oh, they received that oath. And so now when I'm on that courtroom stand, yes, indeed, they did take an oath, because keep in mind that if there's a situation and it's being called, notarization is called into question, and it is a jurat, if we didn't administer that oath, they can begin to argue on a technical ground that this was not done correctly because you didn't administer that oath. So again, the journal is set up there to help protect you and the public and the documents that you notarize.
All right, and two last questions. One, define the definition of bound. Can it be spiral bound? Can it be attached? And then the other question is, the last one of the night is, do you offer example pages so that they can submit and get approval to utilize your journal?
Okay, so first question, definition of bound. Like pretty much anything, it's going to depend on your Secretary of State's office as to what they consider bound. Many of them don't have a formal definition. Some of them say specifically what that is, but most of them do not. So it becomes something that either you can reach out to your Secretary of State. I will say that the Integrity Journal is considered a bound journal. It has a backing with the pages that are glued into it. And so you would be able to notice tamper. That's basically what it's about, is can you identify if things have been removed or inserted? Spiral is used by some people I know that use the Integrity Journal and take it into duplicating places like FedEx, UPS, and they have the back cut off and they put on a spiral bind, and they consider that to be bound. So there's just a variety of definitions around that, but it's really about security and tamper proof is what they're getting at behind the intent. And then that second question, I don't know if I quite understand. There are, in the Integrity Journal, there are pages at the very beginning which provide instructions on how to use it. And if anybody had any additional questions, they can certainly reach out to me and contact me, which I've had other people do. And it's great conversation about different ways of making that journal work for you in your business. So I don't know if that answered that last question.
They're just looking for an example page of the actual journal
Oh,
entry.
yes.
You know,
Yes.
there's somewhere that they can get that. Is that on your website, maybe?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. So if you go to my website and the Integrity Journal page of it, there is, as you scroll down, the pages are, the interior pages are presented. You can click on those and make them bigger so you can see in detail what's on each page.
I've got a look inside button. So if you click there,
Yes.
I think you can get those images or pages, what you're looking for there, guys. Just got to check that Amazon link, look inside right on
If
top of
you're,
the book.
and it's as long as you're going from like a PC or a laptop, it's a mobile phone that Amazon doesn't use. That look inside feature is the only thing.
Well,
And
learn
do you have
something new
time for
every
one
day.
more question?
Sure.
All right. So in an in-person signing, do they sign the journal before or after they sign the document?
So my process is, we greet hello, and then we take the ID, I take the IDs and verify that that's all good and to go. Then what I do is I have the signers actually enter their information in the journal, so their address, contact info, and then they sign the journal. I compare their signature to the ID, and then we begin to sign the documents.
All right, so definitely before. And I think that, the only other question is how do you close out an old journal to transfer over?
Oh, sweet question. Yes. So if your journal is full, then you're done. There's no, you can, if you would like to take and bless it before you put it into a secure location, that is always recommended. But secondly, then if you have a journal, and I went through this, that I hated, oh Lord, I hated, I found out that you can close out a journal that you're currently using and go to a new journal. And the way you do that is really simple. I love this. So literally you go to your last entry and you write in big letters right below it, end. And then you put a line through, you strike each page thereafter, and it's closed.
And that
Awesome.
seems to be the end of the chat area. So feel free.
That's great, guys. It's 5 o'clock anyway, and there's two things. One, I am starving. Two, my dog needs walked. And three, I won't mention the third one, but we'll we're gonna wrap it up here. But Clyde, thank you so much. Are you a fan of Jeopardy by any chance?
I like Jeopardy, but I am not I cannot do Jeopardy.
You just seem like you'd kill it on Jeopardy for me, Clyde. You just got a Jeopardy type vibe to you. I'm not meaning that as an insult. I mean that in the truest sense of a compliment.
Thank you.
So take it the right way, brother.
I will.
There you go. Sharp fella. All right. So let's